Hey, everybody, welcome to the Sally Allen podcast. As you know, this is a platform for people to come and share their stories of resilience. And today, boy, do we have a story for you. I have my friend Mitch, and I'm sure I'll mess up his last name, Kempourakis?
Yes.
Kempourakis, I got it right.
Yeah, you
Okay.
did a great job.
Thank you. And Mitch is the founder of First Step Nevada. It's a nonprofit, and he engage and educate our community to be better, and he inspires them to be better. And Mitch's story is going to blow you away today. I don't want to say much and take away from his story. So, Mitch, welcome. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me here. I mean, this is incredible. I love this. It's my first time ever on a podcast, so I'm really excited this morning.
Good. Hope you're not as nervous as I am.
Well, my foot is tapping under the table, but I'll be all right.
I'm just kidding. So, Mitch, what you sharing with us today?
Well, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about my past and my present and my future.
Okay.
I'll start it off with my beginning. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and I moved to South Florida when I was about 10 years old. And once I moved to South Florida, I started doing the things that every normal teen would do, drinking and experimenting in drugs. And during the mid to late 80s, the cocaine wave had really come across South Florida. And a new drug was starting to hit the community, and it was called crack cocaine.
Hmm.
And when I was 16, I used for the first time, and it led me down a spiral of addiction. So what had happened is I dropped out of high school, and I basically built a relationship with a drug.
Mm.
So I continued to use. I dropped out of school, and when you're using drugs, most of the time you find yourself getting in trouble. So with that came incarceration. I was incarcerated when I was 18 years old, and I went through a series of years struggling with addiction, losing family members, friends, never really being able to have a serious relationship or hold a serious job or career. And I did that for 28 years. And so
Wow, 28 years.
28 years, yeah. So I went from going to jail when I was 18 years old to going to jail again when I was 40. And it was really an eye opener of I needed to get my life back on track. I needed to make a change. But I just didn't know how, you know. And finally, I made the decision to take a vacation out to Las Vegas for 3 days. And I came out here with my brother, and I absolutely loved Las Vegas. I love the weather. I love the fact that it didn't rain. And, and I was still living in the world, so I enjoyed the nightlife and the 24-hour city. It was right up my alley, so to speak. And so I had always had a dream of coming to Las Vegas. I just didn't know why or how I was going to get there. So later in my life, and when I was about 42 years old, I made a decision to just pack up and go, to change my environment and leave South Florida. So I wound up leaving my job. I was a carpet installer, and I got a one-way ticket, and I wound up coming to Las Vegas with $26 in my pocket.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack right there. $26 in your pocket. So let's go back a little bit to when you talk about being on cocaine for 28 years.
Mm.
Were you in and out of rehab, or people coming alongside you trying to help you?
Yes.
What was that journey like?
I was actually one of the first people to ever be part of drug court, drug cells. Where you see it, it's very popular today. Some other organizations work with people behind bars to help them to be able to transition into life outside of jails and prisons. Yes, I did. I struggled with things like NA, and I wasn't ready to open up yet, and it just made it very difficult for me. A lot of my drug use was for lack of self-confidence. I always used the drugs to hide from myself. Um, and unfortunately, it took me down a very bad road.
Yeah. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mitch, but I think we have to be ready to make that change in order for change to happen.
Yeah. Well, change is not easy.
Mm-hmm.
And in my case, change brings fear. For me, it was a fear of you know, changing everything in my life from friends to habits to behaviors to responsibilities. And it just, it would become overwhelming. And I would run from change because of that fear. So making that step to get on that plane was being able to overcome fear to search for change.
Mm. So then what happened? You came to Vegas.
So I came to Las Vegas and I stayed in an area on Fremont and 15th Street. I stayed at South Cove Apartments. It was a weekly, monthly type place over in the downtown area. And we stayed in a little tiny efficiency with me, my grandmother at the time, my brother and his girlfriend. And I slept underneath the little kitchen table and I detoxed for 2 weeks.
That couldn't have been easy.
It wasn't. By the third day, I was ready to get on a plane and head back to South Florida. I questioned a lot. I questioned life. I questioned my ability to get clean. Where am I going? You know, all the basic questions were like, am I crazy? Am I
Yeah.
is this going to work? And it was very humbling. I'd come from a middle class family all through growing up, and I had what was a decent paying job, and to all of a sudden give up everything for sobriety was definitely a challenge. I mean, it was a case where I had to come to whether, I had to weigh the options. Is the material things in life important, or is my sobriety, my health, my well-being, my emotional status, you know, that was more important to me than anything material in my
Yeah.
life.
But something had to click. What was that? Something had to click to say, like, I'm done with this. I'm going to Vegas and I'm making a change. What clicked?
It was the feelings of suicide.
Mm.
Suicide had started, depression had started to build up. What what began for me as a fun lifestyle of drugs and alcohol, and quickly it changed to depression, to a point where I was getting older and life was changing, and I wasn't ready to go on anymore.
Mm.
Um, I was ready to give up, uh, and I started contemplating ways to commit suicide, um, how I could do it, where I could do it, when I could do it, and that became a real warning sign that I need help, I need change.
Yeah. Did you talk to somebody about it, or you just came to the realization, like, I have to go get help because I can't just live like this?
I didn't share it with anybody. Unfortunately, at that time, I wasn't very open, and I didn't really want to share things. I felt embarrassed.
Yeah.
A lot of that was shame and guilt, so I didn't share with anybody. I just something clicked, and said, "You need to get on this plane and get out of here." Now, I don't know if that was God. I don't know if that was just my conscience, but I found out later what it was. So
Yeah.
I'll share that a little later.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So now you're under the table. We come back to you're sleeping under this table. You're detoxing. Walk us through what happened next.
Well, I started to continue my career as a carpet installer with my brother, and we started to put our pieces together with life. And all through my addiction, people had told me that if you could just stop using, that life would change. And what I realized that it didn't. I started putting together 2 weeks, then 30 days, and then 60 days, and 90 days clean. But life wasn't changing for me. It was becoming actually more difficult.
Mm.
The things that I had hid from all those years were starting now to rear their heads.
Mm.
Um, I had to look at myself in the mirror and start to deal with me, the person that I avoided for all those years. And it was definitely a transition, especially with anger. I was dealing with a lot of anger and resentment. And it was very difficult to try to be positive and getting sober, but yet carrying all that anger and that sin and that resentment and shame. I always refer to like a giant backpack with just bowling balls in it, and you're carrying that everywhere you go. And even on the front, you may be smiling, but you're carrying all that weight. Nobody knows you're carrying it because I never shared.
Right. How did you start working through that, Mitch?
Um, well, we moved from 15th to Fremont. We moved in an area. I was new to Vegas, and they said, yeah, we moved over by Sahara and Philadelphia Ave. And somebody says to me, oh man, you just moved into the Naked City. And I was like, the Naked City? What's that? Well, I found out that the Naked City was a high crime, high drug, high prostitute area.
Oh my God.
And but you know what? We had our own little apartment. We had our dogs, and we looked at it as a step up.
Got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so things went well actually for a couple of months, but again, dealing with anger and the resentment. Me and my brother we were just fighting constantly. It was getting bad, and it was getting to the point where we were realizing that our life is not full. We have no joy in our life, you know, and my brother actually started to talk more about suicide again, and the conversation just became more often and more serious. And I'll say this to anybody out there: if you're dealing with anybody that's talking about suicide, please get them help. Um, so we had gotten in a big argument, and he had left to take his life, and I wound up being able to get him to stay, and we were on our way to go shopping on Charleston, and I believe it's Commerce or Industrial over there, and we got in a big fight, and I stopped him from leaving to commit suicide, and we actually got in a fist fight in the street, and cars were stopping, and they're getting out, and they're like, what's going on? And we're both in tears, and we're hanging on to each other and pulling each other's shirts, and my nose is bleeding and his mouth is bleeding. And he looked at me and he said, why won't you just let me do this?
Yeah.
And I let go, thank you. And I let go, and I said, fine, if that's what you want to do, I can't stop you anymore. And I couldn't stop him because there was nothing to stop him for. We had no purpose in life.
So all this time you've gotten clean and you've gotten sober. Was your brother, was he sober too?
He was sober as well.
But you're saying, what I'm hearing you say is that now you're both sober and you're clear.
Mm-hmm.
Your judgment is clear. You're finding like you have no purpose.
Right.
You're not doing anything meaningful with your life.
Nope. No.
Talk to us a little bit about that. How did you find that meaning and purpose?
Well, after that, he had left again, and I stayed at the apartment by myself. And I remembered this food pantry in this neighborhood, and I started going back to my survival mode. All right, I need food. I know the rent's paid for 2 weeks. I need to find a place for these dogs if I have to be homeless. I started putting the things together, and I said, I need food. And I walked over to this food pantry, and I was not a religious person. I never went to church. I never prayed. I didn't have a Bible. And I walked in there, and I remember telling a friend about a month earlier. They said, why don't you go over to that food pantry? They give food out there. And I said, no. I said, they have a sermon before you get the food. I said, I am not sitting through a sermon to get the food. So
Right.
I'll be okay.
Yeah.
And I found myself um, walking towards the pantry. And as I got closer, I could feel myself, you know, getting ready to lose it, getting ready to just burst out with emotions. And I sat in the sanctuary there, and there was a pastor there, and he started to preach, and I just lost it.
Mm.
All the emotions from the last 30 years just poured out. The shame, the guilt, the hurt. Um, I was just like, they talk about, like an ugly cry. It was an ugly cry. I'm telling you, there was stuff coming out, and it's not pretty.
It's the best cry, though.
It is the best cry.
It's a releasing cry.
Yeah. And the pastor at that time, he stopped the sermon and he came over to me. He said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No."
Mm.
And after that sermon, he pulled me aside and he said, "Are you ready to surrender?" And I was like, "Man, I feel like I've been surrendering already." And he said, "No." He said, "Are you really ready to surrender your life to Jesus Christ?" And I said, "Yeah." And that day I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And at the end of the service, we prayed that my brother would come home safely. And as I started walking home with some groceries, at the end of the alley was my brother.
Wow.
And I asked him to come back to the apartment, and I said, "Let's eat. I have some food." And he asked me, "Where did you get that from?" I said, "The food pantry here in the neighborhood." And he looked at me, he said, You went to the
Yeah.
I said, "And I also surrendered."
There's a lot of changes here.
He said, What is that?" I said, "It's a Bible they gave me."
Uh-huh.
And he said, "Okay." So I said, "I'm going to cook something." I said, "Because I'm heading back up there. At 6 o'clock, they have a Bible study that I'm going to go to." And he said, "Okay." So as I was cooking, we ate, and he started putting on his shoes. And I just thought he was going to leave again. And I said, "Well," I said, "if you want to come back, you're more than welcome. I'm going to be here." And he looked at me. He said, "No." He goes, "I'm going to Bible study with you."
Oh, wow.
And we both went to Bible study. And we were welcomed by the pastor there with a homemade bowl of beef stew. And about halfway through that Bible study, a gentleman came out from the back, and his name is Michael Clement, and he was the executive director at the nonprofit Casa de Luz. And he introduced himself, and I introduced myself, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Would you like to come volunteer?" And my eyes lit up, because when I had come to the Naked City, I'd realized that I started getting swelling in my right foot.
Mm.
And I just thought it was shoes or being on my feet for too long. And I started to get a lot of shortness in breath. I smoked, obviously, drugs and smoked cigarettes for years, and I just thought that was just something that was coming along, until there were nights where I couldn't breathe at all. I
Mm.
felt like I was bloated. I was sleeping in a chair because I couldn't lay flat. I was I was vomiting, and I had no idea. But just like the 28 years of using, there were 28 years that I never went to a doctor.
Oh, wow.
So again, that fear of, uh-oh.
Mm-hmm.
And I dragged it out for as long as I could because I was stubborn. And I had to go to the emergency room, and I was diagnosed with CHF, chronic heart failure, AFib, irregular heartbeat, and all the things that come with heart failure and heart disease. And that was a shock. It wasn't a surprise because
Mm-hmm.
I know I had done a lot of damage to my body, but it was definitely a surprise. So I had to stop installing carpet. I was actually unemployed. I didn't have an ID. I didn't have a birth certificate. And so I had to start to put my life back together. But I started to volunteer at Casa de Luz, and I started to be mentored by Michael Clement. And that's when my life began to change.
Mm. Mitch, you said one thing before you started. You can pick your sin and you can pick your deed that you do, but you can't pick the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
Yeah.
the consequences, the heart failure.
Sure.
And what capacity is your heart operating on now?
Actually, I have a doctor's appointment October 10th. I'll let you know. I'll text you the info. But I take 9 medications a day. High blood pressure, diuretics, and things like that. But by the grace of God, I have a great doctor who keeps me running around and keeps this
Yeah.
heart ticking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just love your attitude. You've been through so much and you're not blaming anybody for it. You've taken full responsibility and you're moving forward in life and you're making a change and a difference. What are some of those things you're doing?
And that's one of the things that I wanted to um, apply in our nonprofit. So, I was later hired on staff at Casa de Luz, and I was the pantry director for about 2.5 years. And there I was responsible to give out food to the community. But what I started to learn is that there were people that were suffering with the same things that I did, and that was low self confidence. And I just living in that neighborhood and working in that neighborhood and just listening to all the feedback from everyone that we were all going through things that were pretty similar.
Yeah.
And there was something that was always holding us back, whether you were gambling or whether you just whether it was toxic relationships that you felt such low self-esteem that you were lowering your standards, and your physical condition, your appearance. There were so many different things. So we had a young mother come in one time, and she was physically abused, and I absolutely felt helpless. And I said, you know what? I want to try to help people in a different fashion.
Mm.
So I started to pray on it, and God gave me a path to start my own nonprofit, and it was to help people, but also to hold people accountable.
Mm.
You know, because I had a lot of people hold me accountable. I had a lot of accountability partners that helped me grow, and if it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for some of the lectures and tough love, I mean, it's a phrase that I never used in the past, but it's true,
Yeah.
and it helped me tremendously. And so what we do is we provide uh, seminars and workshops in the community designed to help people in different fashions. So such as self-confidence, financial literacy. That was a big issue for me and a lot of people I help. Once you get past that stage of addiction or whatever you're overcoming, you start to realize that you need to work on yourself a little bit. Um, I went from somebody that couldn't save $10 to now having a retirement fund, a savings, a checking, and it's actually through one of our partners, which makes it so awesome, is that I can not only help myself but also help others through this, and it's all free. All our seminars and workshops are absolutely free to everybody in the community.
Wow. How can people come alongside you and help you?
Well, there's a bunch of different ways. You can go on our website. We have an opportunity there to sign up, and you can register to volunteer. You could also make financial donations to help the community. But what I always encourage people to get involved emotionally. There are so many people out there that really just need these phrases, helping hand, hand up. Sometimes we just need a pat on the back for somebody to say, you know what, you're worthy, I love you, and I'm going to support you and be there the whole way. And I think it's so important because all through my growth, I've had so many people that were able to lift me up.
Yeah.
Get that call in the afternoon. Hey, I was just thinking about you. You know,
Yeah.
and I think it's really, really important that we have people that journey alongside with you.
Yeah.
And right now we're doing a lot of work in a senior community called Sunrise Gardens, and we're seeing a tremendous amount of impact because we're just going there and we're interacting. We're playing games, we're telling stories, we're having speakers come in and dinners, and last month we played karaoke together. But it's just opened that door to be able to support people in times, we just went through this pandemic, a lot of isolation, a lot of loneliness. So now we get that opportunity now to love on people and be able to support them in any way we can.
That's awesome. Mitch, what would you say What would you say to someone who's gone through similar to what you have, and when the temptation comes? Because when you're addicted to something, the temptation never fully go away, right? How
Right.
do you fight that temptation?
Well, it's different for each individual. Um, for me, it just became a better life.
Mm.
You know, um, I would never ever wish what I went through on anybody.
Yeah.
So why would I wish it on myself again?
Mm.
You know, and I tell friends, it's like, somebody told me a long time ago to write down how you felt in your worst day during your addiction
Mm.
and to carry that with you in your wallet as a reminder of where you were at that moment.
Mm.
So, I always, when things come up, and there have been, listen, there's struggles always, right? And there were times where it would have been easier for me to just say, hey, I can't do it. Let me just go back to using, right?
Yeah.
Shortcut. I was used to doing that. That's how I lived. Everything was a shortcut. I never put in the time or effort to try to do anything. Um, but yeah, I just tell people, just try to put yourself back in that moment, and I don't care what it is, whether it's drug addiction, weight loss, relationships. You have a very powerful story yourself, and I've taken a lot from that. And yeah, do you want to see yourself in that position again?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the answer is obviously not, right?
Yeah.
So, but relapse is a part of recovery.
Yeah.
I've relapsed many times. I didn't go cold turkey,
Right.
as like they say, but for me, it was part of being saved and being able to know that that person is no longer existing,
Yeah.
right? Um, that
Becoming that new man every day.
yeah, that transformation,
Transformation.
right?
Yeah.
That softened heart, you know,
Yeah.
and so yeah. So like yesterday, I was able to help a disabled veteran at Sunrise Gardens just organize their home. She's kind of a hoarder. She's got a lot of stuff, and she admits it. And I spent the afternoon there going through it with her. But, at the end, she was smiling. She says, Mitch, I love you.
Oh.
And I said, I love you too. But, it's
Yeah.
again, it's those opportunities, to just be with somebody, to just let somebody know that you care.
Yeah.
We don't want you to be like this. We want to be able to help you, whether it's cleaning out someone's closet or helping them through addiction or helping them through self-confidence or through a job interview, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Mitch, you inspire me daily because I know your story, and every time I hear it, it's just so inspiring from where you were to where you're at now. And I feel like we can say, only by the grace of God,
Amen.
only by the grace of God,
Yeah.
and for that. So, what's the takeaway today for our audience?
Whew. I would say a takeaway would be never lose hope. I had a conversation with someone, and she's going through the same thing, only with her son. And she got the chance for me to share my testimony and hear it recently. And she came up to me afterwards and she told me the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, never lose hope. Never lose hope. Because if somebody like myself can find Christ at 45 and find sobriety and, a new way of life, anybody can, right?
Yeah.
And, now being an executive director and having the nonprofit and being able to help people, our friend Missy has quoted me as the hope dealer. And I've kind of taken that on. And, it's just about not losing hope and finding purpose in life. We had, again, another senior that came over from Sunrise Gardens to the Crossing Midtown. And she was so excited. She came up to me and she said, Mitch, she goes, I'm going to be volunteering in the kids' ministry. And I said, that's fantastic. And I walked by later, and there she is sitting on the floor with the babies. And she's got her fingers out, and they're walking. And the smile on her face, Sally, is just, it's priceless.
Yeah.
Priceless. Because you're just, again, when it comes down to it, you're just inspiring people, right? Just our interaction at our event, whether it's playing bingo or karaoke, sharing that time with her and allowing her to, inspiring her to reconnect with God, right? And giving her purpose again in life.
Yeah.
So now when Saturday night rolls around, she sets that alarm clock because she has purpose on Sunday morning. And it's just a great feeling to be able to share that with people.
Yeah. You're not just inspiring, you're changing lives and you're giving people hope. And that's amazing. On the last podcast, we talked about this, and it will sound redundant, but it's so appropriate that now you're living a purpose-driven life. And yes, you are the hope dealer, and you're out there letting people know that they can change and they can be better.
Hmm.
So thank you so much for coming on
Oh,
the
thank you.
show, Mitch.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you. And you know, friends, I always say it's never too late to start living resiliently. And one of the things that Mitch said to me that really touched me is that if you want to come alongside and give people hope, or you want to help, like in simple ways, giving them a pat on the back and
Hmm.
let them know you're there for them and that you love them, and that you're going to walk with them every step of the way. It doesn't have to be something huge and big and significant. Just being
Exactly.
there for people, that's the important thing. Mitch, thank you again for
Thank
being
you
a guest
again.
on the show. I appreciate
It's a
you
pleasure.
sharing. Yes, and thank you, Sticky Pot Studio, and G Money George
Thank
behind the
you.
decks.
Appreciate it.
So, and if you're listening and you love our show, remember to rate, review, and share with your friends. Thanks again for listening.